Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery podcast are proud to bring you Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast. Join your host, Mike the Podfather, and Jersey Ed as they address the real issues in health and wellness for first responders, from physical and mental health to relationships and work-life balance. We leave no stone unturned. Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your friends in recovery answering the call. Welcome to another episode of Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast, sponsored by Genesis House and produced by Sweets Productions in Beverly, Mass. And now, here are your hosts, the Podfather Mike Miles and Jersey Ed.
Thank you, Sweets. As always, we are happy to be here, ready and available to help our first responders out there across the country and abroad.
That's right, Mike. You know, I love learning about new topics, and I know so our listeners do too. I can tell by all the emails and social media chatter that goes on.
Very true.
Yep, absolutely. So another show, Mike.
Here we are.
We had a great show last week, and now we got another guest, a great guest this week, who we'll be introducing in a little bit. And we just, we're just here to help the first responders and get the information out and talk about a little bit of everything, like from divorce to suicide. Mike, our last show we did last week, I think suicide's going to come up a lot more than what I thought would have. I think this is a big, huge concern in the first responders world. I know you talk about it a lot, and I've been to a couple conferences, and they're talking about suicide a lot in these conferences, and it's all because of the job that you guys do.
Right. Well, there's no surprise that, the number one profession that has suicide is corrections. It used to be police officers. We're number two, but we were number one. And, it's just one of those jobs where, there's a lot of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders. There's a lot of suicides at the prisons, jail hangings and such. And I think that triggers a lot of correctional officers who are going through their own problems.
Yeah.
They have the highest rated divorce as well for a profession. Maybe to entertain suicide ideation, which is thoughts of suicide. And most people have that, especially if you see a suicide.
Yeah.
Today, Eddie, I actually have Jersey Ed, I actually have a book written by a Lowell police officer. He's 92 years old. His name is Harold Waterhouse. He was a arson investigator. The name of the book is A25, Arson 25. He and a fellow firefighter from Lowell were the arson investigators, Harold Waterhouse and Jason Strunk. Jason Strunk had a brother who was a police officer in the town of Billerica, Mass, and which is near Concord, Lexington. And Jason Strunk, unfortunately, he was with his family one day, and he saw a guy spinning his tires, driving erratically, and he got out of his car. He approached the gentleman in the truck. Somehow he got caught up in the door and the window, and the man dragged him to his death right in front of Officer Strunk's family.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah.
But Jason Strunk, Harold Waterhouse, they solved more fires in the city of Lowell. There was so many arsons, for profit, arson for profit. People died in some of these fires, and it was very, very, very horrific atmosphere at the time. I was a young cop working in an area where there was 4 fires in 3 months, and we found out through the knowledge that was distributed by Officer Waterhouse to look for people in the crowd that were at the other fire, maybe the same person. And there was a milkman. He actually had a milk truck, HP Hood, HOOD. It was a milk company, and he was at every fire. And turns out he was a firebug. He was lighting fires.
Wow.
This is a great book. It's on Amazon. A25. I think it's a great read, real simple read. You can read it in one day, but it really gives you an insight into the profession itself of being a police officer and a fire investigator.
Yeah. Mike, we had that, you debuted that book last week on the show, and I've been getting so many emails about that book. I think, there's a lot of interest in it, and the firefighter community is they want to hear stuff like that. And,
of course,
they want to know the bad guys caught. And just keep those emails coming. We'll answer them as quickly as we can, and get you the information as far as where to get that book from. Mike, I'm going to a conference in a week or so, and it's the Florian conference for Rosecrance. Rosecrance is a wonderful facility out near Chicago, and they do first responders treatment just like we do at Genesis House.
Right.
And I want to say hi to Dan DeGrace, who put the conference in, and he's their clinical director over at the Florian, their Florian program. Dan's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time, and hopefully he'll be a guest soon on the show. And you know, the firefighters, we you know, we talk a lot about cops because you and I are kind of, you know, in tuned in that world, but the firefighters go through a lot too. And this book will give a good insight on you know, kind of what you guys, what the firefighters you know, kind of think and see and feel and hear, and you know, finally the bad guys caught. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I think it's important. We started out the show by talking about suicide in this profession, and you know, there's nothing worse. And producer extraordinaire Sweets from Sweet Studio, we're in his hometown of Beverly, and there was a police officer a couple of weeks ago, Sweets, that committed suicide. He left quite a, you know, quite a legacy, and also he left 5 children, I believe.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, weeks go by, but you know what? There were more officers, more first responders that committed suicide in those weeks. And, you know, it's sad, and they don't have to. I'm going to ask you a personal question here, Mike, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but you being a first responder, you were a corrections officer, you were in the military. Did you ever think about suicide? Did you ever think about, you know, maybe I'm not doing my job right, or whatever the case may be? Right. I know it's very personal, but maybe it'll help somebody out there that this is not, it's not normal thoughts, but it's could be there.
Sure. Well, you also know I'm a recovering alcoholic drug addict. I've been sober over 32 years. Yeah, there was a time in my life right before I got sober where suicide looked pretty inviting to me. I hadn't paid bills in months. I had a relationship that wasn't going well. My job itself wasn't going well. I was out of work. You know, I was really in a bad way, and I decided, you know what? I was 31 years old. If I took my own life, things would be better. And yeah, I've been there. And not to be melodramatic, but it was a comforting feeling. I thought, wow, I can shoot myself in the head, and this will be the end of it. And I had a gun. I had won as an award, Police Officer of the Year. I saved a woman's life, and they gave me this beautiful. It was called the Bodyguard. It was a stainless steel Smith Wesson 38, and you know, I took the gun. I had some writing paper. I wrote my mother and father a note.
Wow.
I wrote my girlfriend a note, who had my son Christopher, who's 33 now, and you know, I actually was pretty close to it. And I don't know whether it was the grace of God or just I got a second chance at life. I put down the pen, put down the gun, and called a friend of mine at 4 o'clock in the morning, and a true friend who was at my house at 5:30, and off I went to a treatment facility, a lot like Genesis House. They didn't have a first responders track back then in the 80s, and 86 actually, and I got the help I needed, and this is why I do what I do today.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not ashamed of any of that. It made me a better person. It made me a better cop, a better father, a better man in general. Yeah. As you know, you're in recovery. You've been sober quite a while, 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, we've helped a lot of people. I not that we're going to turn this into a admiration podcast, but you do a lot, and you really go the extra mile for it, because I've worked with you very closely, getting brother police officers, sister police officers in treatment,
and family members too.
And
we
family
work together.
members too.
You and
right.
I work together.
That's
family
right,
members.
and we help each other. So yeah. I really think it's you know, it's very admirable of someone like yourself who, you know, you could just go through the motions, do your job, and still make the money you make. But here you are, you know, you fly up here to Massachusetts to do a podcast like this, and I don't think people realize that, you know, what you have to go through every day when we decide to do this. Plus, you know, we have Sweets putting up with us in this new beautiful studio, because you're such a diva, you know.
I requested all this stuff. We had a little tour on Facebook last week, and it's up there, and you guys can check it out. But Sweets did a great job in this studio. Awesome. You know, I know we kind of you know, went through it last week, but you know, it is a great studio, and Sweets, unbelievable job you did here.
A very good golfer, Sweets says. We played the I know I said it last week. We played the country club in Brookline, Mass, which is the oldest country club in the country. Made movies about it, and he's quite a golfer.
Yes,
he's got that long arc swing. He's a tall, handsome man, and don't get nervous, Sweets.
Tall, dark, and handsome.
I appreciate you calling what I did golf. That was very nice of you.
Oh no, you had some great shots, but we had a great time. We got to know each other a little better, and you know, as soon as we left this studio few weeks ago, and coming back to what I see today, it's just amazing. I can't imagine the hours you put in here, but boy, what a great place to work from.
Unbelievable. It really is. And Mike, and thank you for sharing that story. That's tough to share. It's not easy. A friend of mine committed suicide, a dear friend of mine, when I was still using, in jail. And I don't think they had cameras way back when. This is 30 years ago. But his wife wrote an article, not an article, but in something in the newspaper, the local newspaper in Saraville, New Jersey. After he killed himself, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right. Well, Eddie, I'll tell you, I wrote an article for a police magazine, and that was the title of it. And I don't know, I must have got that from your friend, because that's the title of my article.
Wow.
And it certainly is. And I had a co-worker, Amy Doolin, who is a therapist in my office. She helped me co-write it, and we got an award for it, actually.
Oh my God.
Yep. And I just did some research, and you know what? Things do get better.
It does.
You got to give it a day.
All right, so I'd like to bring on our guest, Brian Casey, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Brian is the author of the book Good Cop, Good Cop, and he is also an active police sergeant, EAP director, and a trainer for the Blue Watch.
Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Glad to be here. I only wish I was with you guys.
You'd have a cigar with us?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we'll smoke to that.
Can you imagine what this coat would smell like after a cigar?
I'm going to tell a story about you
Nice
real quick, if you
coat.
don't mind, okay? Do you mind if I reveal your story of your smoking clothes?
Oh, well, sure. Depends. Go ahead, go with it. Go for it.
You can stop me at any time. We can edit it all out if you want. But so Brian and I meet at a cigar lounge in St. Paul, and we sit and have a cigar, kind of like Mike and I do, and that's how me and Brian kind of. Maybe I introduced him to smoking cigars, but a couple times in and out of the cigar lounge, he ended up saying, my wife hates the smell of my clothes. Brian has to take all his clothes off in the garage when he's done with me. Not done with me, but but when he's done smoking cigars with me, and enter his home that way. It does get pretty hectic as far as smell goes for other people who don't enjoy this.
That's for sure.
Well, you got to add it's a detached garage too.
A detached garage, yes. So Brian streaks across his neighborhood, naked, running into the house, and his wife yelling at him. But welcome, Brian.
Yeah.
Was
Thanks
that a
for
good
having
intro
me.
for you?
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're at.
Well, I'm a police sergeant. Cops every day say, when you're going to retire. And I guess the line that you should use is at the end of the month. Oh, and they tell them, but you don't tell them, you don't know, decide which month that is, I guess. And then, so I'm a director of an employee assistance program, which means I am super fortunate to be able to devote all my time and attention to the mental health and well-being of about 600 sworn police officers, civilian employees, and their household family members.
And do you see a need for your position, Brian, in that world, in the police world? Do you think every larger department should have somebody like you on board?
I really think, in my opinion, I think the fundamental employee assistance or employee assistance like programs or services, I think are really scalable to agencies large and small. There's a police department in Minnesota, New York Mills, and I think they have 3 or 4 full-time officers. What does New York City have? 40,000? Just city police? I don't know. I actually think those 4 police officers or sheriff deputies or whatever, they need those services as well. And I actually think you can scale it to that. And sometimes what it is a true believer within that agency. Say you have a chief or a member of the agency that's in really successful recovery or has an interest in this, or maybe you even have members of the community that are in the therapeutic world and are willing to offer services, that type of thing. So it would be a hard time arguing with me that agencies large and small don't need this. And this is one way of looking at it. whether you're a firefighter, EMS worker, corrections officer, police officer. You know, in order to get good at your job, you need to gain experience. And with that experience comes exposure to potential psychological trauma, other harm that's associated with the job. So definitely, because we actually ask these employees to get good at their job, which requires increased experience, which requires increased exposure to, let me just say, toxic things, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what the police business is about, is toxic. You know, you're going after toxic people. You know, you're trying to get them to where they can be safe, and in turn, that causes a lot of stress, a lot of trauma in your lives. Could cause death too, unfortunately, sometimes.
Well, you know, so being a police officer and maybe a patrol officer, you deal continuously with really good citizens going about their lives, and you feel a sense of duty to them to help them go about their lives unmolested, you know. And but sometimes police officers kind of have to go out of their way to be engaged with those folks, because the majority of their job is dealing with victim and victimizers and maybe victims of crime. I was a paramedic for 20 years before I became a cop, and it's noticeably different being a cop, because as a paramedic, you get to be the good guy often. You're coming to people's, whether it's an elderly person that's fallen or someone having a heart attack. With law enforcement, I do agree that there is more toxic exposure. That's why I actually feel like, and I'm glad you guys brought it up, and there's attention for corrections officers, because I actually think police officers and corrections officers probably have a lot more in common than maybe a police officer and a firefighter, for example.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. And I was the EAP for the city of Lowell, about 250 sworn personnel. And I did that for 8 years. And I got to say that surrounding cities and towns in Massachusetts, would word of mouth, you know, some of their officers would come to me, whether they had a 13-man or woman department, or they had a 33-man woman department. You know, word of mouth, they would come to me. And my chief at the time, he had no problem. The deputy chief had no problem with me driving to Burlington, Billerica, Chelmsford, Tewksbury, all these small, Carlisle, all these small cities and towns. And, you know, I think a lot of people misconstrue that you can be a cop in a 6-man woman department or a 600-man woman department, and you're still going to encounter the same type of problems. You're going to have robberies, you're going to have rapes, you're going to have murders, you're going to have car accidents, car stops. You're going to have it on a smaller scale, yes, but the same incidents. And I think people just misconstrue. And as you know, as well as I do, and everybody probably should know, it's been open on season on cops since Ferguson, Missouri, with, you know, the President Obama at the time. And it even goes back to Trayvon Martin down in Florida. You know, everybody seemed like they took the side of this poor young kid who was going to the candy store. Well, the fact was, he wasn't really going to the candy store. He was a thug, and he beat this guy senseless. They have audio recordings from a neighbor calling the police, and this guy protected himself. But the media spun it a different way. There were actually people on the media with their hands up, don't shoot, for Ferguson, Missouri, which that did not happen to Officer Wilson. His gun was being ripped out of his holster, so this Michael Brown could take that gun. I'm sure he wasn't going to take it and twirl it around and crack walnuts with it. So I think with the media doing what they did, and now where we are now, several years later, you know, cops are getting shot at a higher rate than it's ever happened before, and it's so pathetic, so sinful. Yeah. And I blame the media.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think cops are afraid to pull their guns now, or even, you know, with everything going on, they're afraid. They're a little bit more taken back, I guess, and putting themselves in more dangerous situations, I'm guessing, because of incidents like this.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think I watched a video the other day from another city where these officers were struggling with a non-compliant guy in the street, and I couldn't help but conclude that they needed more force earlier. And force is not a dirty word. It's what the Constitution provides law enforcement the opportunity to use if people refuse lawful orders. And I think that is becoming a problem. I was being a police officer kind of later in life, I got to be a police officer pre-Ferguson and post-Ferguson, and it's a dramatic change, and there's a lot of flux and transition going with that, and it's very impactful. And I think it treads into the area of both moral injury and a sense of betrayal that some police officers might even feel.
Yeah.
I think I'll just tell you the most harmful thing that I've seen police officers experience during the things that you mentioned, Mike, was the statements by loved ones on Facebook or to each other about the officers. And I remember experiencing this myself. I'm thinking, a police officer. How can you believe this narrative, knowing that what you know about police officers? So
yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break here, Brian, and we'll continue this conversation when we come back from the break.
Great.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. The First Responder Recovery Program at Genesis House is led by a doctorate-level therapist with direct professional experience as a first responder himself. Treatment modalities focus on psychiatric care, relapse prevention, stress management, and trauma-informed care for PTSD. Learn why their individualized approach makes a difference for first responders. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking to Brian Casey and Podfather here, along with Jersey Ed.
Jersey Ed, yeah.
Brian, before we went to break, you were talking about some of the narratives that were being written and talked about on the news about police officers, and you brought up a very, very good point about family members sending emails and social media, tweets and everything about their loved ones. And I think a lot of people don't believe the narrative that all cops are racist and we're out to get somebody because of the color of their skin. I can honestly say in 35 years, 28 on the street, never once did I ever stop a car or pull someone over or get in someone's face because of the color of their skin. I can guarantee you that.
I bet you were in the household like I was when people of different races, their loved ones died, their matriarch died, their patriarch died, and you were there caring for them as best you could, and you were welcomed into that home. Or you had guys in the back of your squad that had attempted to take their own life or threatened it, and you talked them out of it, and they wept and cried in your car. I mean, police officers have more direct experience with the downtrodden, the disenfranchised, the poor. Police officers are often very forgiving and generous around these folks because they don't want to add to their suffering. And then for people with far less experience to accuse officers of racism without evidence, with all kinds of other bad behavior, when they have actually very little direct experience with the very thing.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. I can remember Christmases when my oldest daughter, who's 45 now, 44, would wrap gifts, Barbie dolls and Matchbox cars. She'd say, are we going to get presents for the kids that you work with, Dad? And I'd say yes. We'd buy 10, 15 of each and would wrap them. She loved doing that. And I'd bring them to work. Some of these kids didn't have Christmas trees in their homes. And you're right. I can't tell you how many hundreds of dollars I've spent on presents, ice cream, tuxedo for the prom, chipped in with another guy to pay for a limo for a kid that lived in the projects to go to the prom. We were so proud that he was going to join the Air Force, and that came out of our pocket without any hesitation at all. And you're right. People don't see that part. But the news media is a very powerful organization. If they want to paint somebody as being a racist or being a hater, they can do it. And they can definitely find people in our profession that maybe are, but I don't know any. And I can honestly say that I've worked with hundreds of police officers, men and women of all races, and I've never worked with a racist cop in my life.
And the media, like Mike said, the media is definitely they don't sell newspapers or they don't sell commercial time on what Mike just talked about, buying a present, or Brian, I went on a ride along with you, and of course we seen some things happening, but there were also good things that you did. You stopped and talked to some folks, and you see how genuine you were just by talking. We went into a homeless camp, and you wanted to make sure these guys were okay. I mean, you could have told those guys to get out of there, but this is their home, this is where they live, and you just want to make sure they were okay. One guy was sleeping. I thought he was dead, but no, he's sleeping. You woke him up, make sure he was okay. I mean, you could have told him get the fuck out of there, but you didn't. You know what I mean? And this is the shit we don't see. This is the stuff side we don't see, because it's not going to sell commercials for the TV, which is understandable, but it's not breaking news. You know what I mean?
But I think one of the ways to guide officers through that, maybe a disillusionment about that, is stuff that Kent Williams, if you're familiar with him, that talks about, and others as well, is if you have a sense of higher purpose, you really don't need it's nice to have the approval and accolades from those that should know better or don't know better or whatever. But, I think often cops are driven by what's right in front of them and the work that needs to be done. And also too, I know a little bit about you guys and how you grew up. And I can think of this, a lot of police officers as a group are not fancy people. They often come from very humble beginnings. There's so many officers that I work with that had very humble and even painful childhoods sometimes. And this is how they leveraged that experience, because they wanted to do police work. And I think what sometimes the public gets confused is they want these gentle people all the time, except for when something bad happens. And I think the public should give cops a little more to have rough edges. I really, you can't have it both ways all the time.
That's a great statement.
Yeah.
A police officer stands ready, literally,
Yep.
to enter a door with not knowing what's on the other side of that door.
Absolutely.
And the cop carries with him in his locker a picture of his own kids, So this is stuff that they're willing to do. And it's not heroic stuff every day. Sometimes cops do mundane.
It's your job. It's your job
stuff every day.
Yeah. Brian, real quick, I want to talk about your book here, because it's something that you wrote in your book. I'm holding up for anybody who can't see this, is just listening. It's called Good Cop, Good Cop. Brian wrote this book. What about, you just had it out about 6 months to a year ago?
At the end of last year.
Yeah. And it's a good read. It's a good read for all law enforcement. Anybody who's in law enforcement. It's called Good Cop, Good Cop, available on Amazon.com and soon to be on Audible too, right?
Yeah.
Audio book.
Yeah.
But go ahead. No. Go ahead. Plug your book.
No. I was just trying. So thanks for saying that. Yeah. And you can also go to more information about the book at goodcopgoodcop.com.
Yeah. And that'll all be in the show notes. But the one thing you wrote in the book, I believe it's in the first chapter. I highlighted it here, but you said that police officers are blue collar workers. And you guys are. That's what you guys are. You guys get out there physically. I mean, you don't pick a box up and put it on a conveyor belt. You don't put a part in a but you are blue collar workers. You guys are in there working hard every day and problem solving with the public. And that's fascinating.
Well, you're right about that. And working every day, working hard can include avoiding work too. I mean, not every cop is super hard working. Not every cop is does amazing things every day. However, the vast majority cops stand ready to.
Yeah.
And they're just, I'm a big proponent of not making cops either heroes or villains. We're right there in the middle, and I think as your earlier conversation about suicide and such, if we are going to be heroes, let us be the fact that we took on our own distress and tried to manage it. And if we were tried to help another cop recognize that suicide, though it makes sense to try to keep them, be that person that they call. And actually, I just want to make a comment about that. Ed, I'm really impressed and proud that you would ask Mike that question.
Thanks.
This is a new age where a podcast where a guy will ask another guy, "Hey, have you had suicidal thoughts?" And then Mike tells his story that is super profound, as if prepared to tell it, which he wasn't, about his own direct experience with that. And Mike, that was really an impressive story. And what I just want to point out about it, what I thought maybe others won't recognize, when you made that call to whoever you made that call, you didn't even know what was at the other end of that call. You just called somebody that you felt might understand, or hear you tell you you're part of that, and so a lot of good things came out of that. But the fact that you didn't know what that meant.
That's a great point. And, Brian, over the years, that made me a better cop. That happened in 86, and I didn't retire till 2015, but it made me a better cop. And the gentleman who I did call died in a plane crash, along with 4 other of my closest friends. They were all Lowell police officers hunting up in Canada, and it was horrific. They died in a horrific plane crash. And Dave Siemens was his name. He'd be so proud because he has 3 sons. They're all police officers. He has a daughter who's a lawyer. And they were just young tykes at the time, and he'd be so proud. And I've stayed close with that family, as close as can be. I don't, hover over them. But when they call me, I drop everything. And I've been to many, many attempted suicides, or people talking about suicide, and in my private practice. But it always brings back memories. And I've shared it with people that, cops, that I've had my own issues with it, because I think it's important to know that that did not define me. I wasn't some weak, washed up guy. I was a guy that just didn't know where to go, and I got the help I needed. And the problem I had was booze and drugs. And once I get rid of that, off we go to a better life.
Absolutely.
Well,
and this book tells us about this. I did. Well, they can go search for Friends in Recovery podcast, and they can get more on your book. In-depth interview with you, Brian, on Friends in Recovery podcast. Just look for that. And I did a lot of, I reread this book again, for this interview, and there's 1,000 things in here that I want to get to. But this is a great topic as far as the wellness of it. This is just one part of the wellness of a police officer.
Right.
And there's so many other parts. Of course, my favorite is exercise and healthy eating in this book, but there's sleep, there's a little bit of everything in your book. And you want to sum the book up real quick, a good selling point for it?
Well, I like to think of it as
thank you here.
Thank you for saying that. One is I think of it a bit as a pep talk, a little bit, to encourage cops to find their purpose and meaning in the job. And even just on the specific topic, and I know I talk about it in the book because I talk about peer support and how powerful that can be. And Mike, the guy that you had called, I remember his last name, forgot his first name. What was his?
Dave Siemens.
Dave. None of us know where we are in the trajectory of helping someone else. Are we at the front end where we kind of make someone aware of something they're not doing right, or giving them good? Are we in the middle where we kind of give them some advice or direction? Or at the end where we close the deal on them? I don't know. We don't know where we are going to be. And it's
That's
actually
a good point.
Know where we are in that. But when people are in distress, we want to make ourselves available, especially cops, for other cops. Or Ed, what you do because of your experience in recovery. So I like to think of the book as a bit of a pep talk. I have learned tons. I've been doing this EAP director job for, I think, 6 years. And I have learned a lot. And I wanted to kind of capture all that in a book directed specifically at police officers, even though obviously the message is useful to firefighters and paramedics. And I have other people that have found the messages.
Well, Brian, not only just to police officers, but paramedics, like you said, and firefighters, but even to me as a civilian, I can relate to this stuff in this book. I mean, like we were talking earlier, everybody has trauma in their lives. Everybody has PTSD to a certain extent. We're human beings, but I related to a lot of this stuff in the book. I mean, obviously, roll call, I don't understand. I've never been to one. I don't understand it. But the healthy eating, the sleep. Just being a good fellow human being. That's what this book is about. Good Cop, Good Cop is about being a good, healthy human being and getting giving a good relationship to another or all other human beings on this earth as best as you could. That's what I got out of your book.
Well, and that kind of actually thank you for that, because also it reminded me when you said about being a good human being. That's why I titled it that way, to kind of play off the word good cop, bad cop. You know, are 50% of the cops good and 50% of the cops bad? No, most cops are Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts that grow up into adult and want to try to do the same work as adults, you know. And also too, to kind of point cops, especially during this climate of flux and misinformation and disillusionment, to try to help invigorate them to think about what is their core purpose and function, and how do they be driven by things internally versus externally.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, what a great way to start the day out here in Massachusetts. You know, you're captivating. You get a great personality, but you speak from the heart. I have a copy of the book in my office. It's one of I have many books there, but this is a very this is a kind of a showpiece for me, and I've had many cops thumb through it. I've told them how to get it. I just think it's important because coming from a Joseph Wambaugh or a Brian Casey, someone who's done the job, there was a Lieutenant Kuntz from New York who was a detective. He wrote more detective, bad guys shoot 'em up, mysterious stuff. It was good, great reading. But when you read a book like this, it's like a deep breath. It's like a breath of fresh air, because there's a lot. This is chock full of advice and situations, that we encounter on a daily basis. And, we are blue collar workers. We're working with the public. We don't live in the best. I'm not saying we don't live in great neighborhoods, but we don't live in the exclusive neighborhoods, unless we marry into it. But we just work. We hope for retirement. Unfortunately, the average life expectancy of a cop is like 59, 60 years old. The average life expectancy of a white male is about 79. So I mean, we can lose almost 20 years if we don't pay attention. And that's important to know. People don't know that. You tell a young cadet in an academy setting, which I've done many times, that, you're going to be old someday like me. And you know what? If you make it to retirement, 59 years old, you're going to be very fortunate. But you might not have a lot of time left if you don't pay attention now over the years. And as we know, this is a profession where a small percentage, 13% of most academies make it to full retirement. 13%. How many people would take a job like that? Not many. But with a type A personality and you're that young age, you think, that's not going to happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
does.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just life in general. But police officers, because you guys are protecting and serving us, you guys probably think a little bit more that, this won't happen to me, but it does. And unfortunately, death happens to every one of us, and hopefully it'll be way, way, way out in the future. But, we all have to think that sometime. Brian, this book is wonderful. It's called Good Cop, Good Cop. You're always a great guest. We love having you on. This is what I want to do. I want everybody to email me. I'm going to get a bunch of emails from everybody. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to pick 5 emails out of there. I'm going to read them. And I'm going to pick the 5, and I'm going to have you send them copies of Good Cop, Good Cop book. Is that okay? And I'll pay for them.
Sure.
Okay, good. So let's get the emails out to friends, help at friendsandrecovery podcast.com, or visit my Facebook page or Genesis House Facebook page, and we'll pick out 5 random. Mike, you're gonna have to help me with it, and then we'll pick out 5 random emails, and we'll make sure they get the book. But again, they can get it on Amazon.com or goodcopgoodcop.com also.
Brian, thanks for coming on the show. You're a delight. I look forward to seeing you again in the near future, and I'll bring a change of clothes for you so we can smoke a cigar.
Thanks.
Well, I would have worn my Lowell T-shirt, but you gave me an extra large.
I got to get you a large. All right.
I use it for running in from the garage into the house when I'm smoking cigars. But can I end with this? A cop said to me the other day, one that I really respect. He said, "Thank you, Brian, for staying in the fight." And I want to say the same to you guys. This is messy work. It's super important work. And you leverage all your life experience to try to do it the best you can. So thank you guys for staying in the fight.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for your guidance,
We appreciate
Brian.
it. Thanks. that was, I could talk to him forever about this topic, and especially this book, Mike. And I know you've read it, and I know I mean, even the change in you since you retired till today. You lost weight. You look great. You're walking. You're doing a lot of different things. Different things in your life now. That it was hard for you to do, or hard to understand when you were trying to serve and help people. Is that something that you feel that you've done? I mean, I see the change in you.
Yeah, no, I definitely thought, when I did retire, that I needed to lose some pounds. I probably needed to lose it long before, but yeah, I want to make it to 80. That's my goal, and I want my kids to be able to see me, go into my old age and watch them mature and have their own lives, and that's what it's about for me is my children and people I care about,
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's been good, and I'm proud of. I wouldn't change one iota of my career. It wasn't always great. I didn't work with people I always loved. The end of my career, I left with a huge room full of people.
Yep.
And I was shocked to see people from all walks of life, and it made me realize I accomplished a lot of what I wanted to accomplish and more.
You did,
just
100%.
by being me. So you know what? I'm proud of who I am,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of what I did. And if you can consider me a friend, you're very fortunate.
I consider you a friend.
Now lend me some money.
I got no money. I can't give you.
Right.
But we were talking about God. What was I going to say here? Cut this out, Mike. All this stuff is available, of course. All the information is going to be available on our on the list on the
show notes.
Show notes. Thanks, Mike. It's cigar's gone to my head. It used to be the Pellegrino, but now it's a cigar. But we can get all that together.
Sounds good.
And don't forget one quick thing that I want to bring up is we talked last week on the show. Send your patches into us. We want to start displaying them up on the wall. We want to be proud of you guys. We want to get a wall of patches.
Yeah, departmental patches, yes. Police, fire, whatever you have, even Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, whatever you got, we'll display them, and we're proud to help anybody that's looking for help.
Absolutely. Send us an email at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com, and I'll give you the address where to send them to, and we'll definitely get them out and get them up here.
Super.
So yeah, it was a good show, Mike.
It was a great show, Ed, and we want to thank Sweets and Sweet Studio.
Oh
and
my God!
Join
Sweets.
us.
Yeah, thanks, Sweets.
Join us for future episodes by subscribing, and help us spread the word by sharing across social media. A special thank you to our sponsor, which is Genesis House, for making this possible, along with our producer, Sweets.
Yay,
Sweet Podcast Studio.
Sweets.
Every time I see Sweets Podcast Studio, I think of Sweet Potato for recording and broadcasting this podcast.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you want to submit any questions or a topic for discussion, please visit our Facebook page, Answering the Call, the First Responders Podcast, or send us an email, like I said before, at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com.
And as always, we are grateful for the privilege to share our stories and insight with you.
Stay safe, everybody.
That concludes this episode of Answering the Call, the First Responder Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House for sponsoring the show and supporting our first responders who are struggling with addiction and mental health. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates. If you are interested in becoming a guest on the show, email us at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com.